The buzzing hum of the electric razor filled the small police locker room, reverberating off the walls. The man holding it wore a twisted grin as he loomed over the man in the chair. Officer Rick Malone towered above a black man, handcuffed and seated, his head slightly bowed, his dark eyes seething with defiance. Even as the razor glided across his scalp, stripping away the tight coils of his hair, the man remained silent. Malone didn't care about the man's status or position. He didn't care that the man was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit or that he exuded authority. To Rick, this man was just another target. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" Malone sneered, venom dripping from his words. "Not anymore, not after this." But the man in the chair, Judge Malcolm R.H.S., didn't flinch. He remained still, his jaw clenched, though a storm raged inside him. He wasn't just anyone. He was one of the youngest and most respected judges in the state. He had stood for justice, fairness, and accountability, and now, 10 minutes later, Officer Rick Malone would be the one in handcuffs, his career obliterated. But how did it come to this? How had a man with so much power found himself at the mercy of a cop with a personal vendetta? How had justice been twisted so quickly? It all started that morning, when Judge Malcolm R.H.S. had just finished delivering a passionate speech at a community outreach event in downtown Atlanta. The event aimed to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the black community, something Malcolm cared deeply about. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, he had spoken fervently about fairness, accountability, and the importance of treating all individuals with dignity, no matter their race or background. The crowd, energized by his words, had hung on to every sentence, and Malcolm felt a surge of hope that change might be on the horizon. As he made his way to his car, he noticed a squad car parked nearby with its lights flashing. "Is there a problem, officer?" Malcolm asked, approaching the vehicle. Rick Malone slowly rolled down the window, his gaze sharp with disdain. He wasn't thrilled about patrolling this event. He wasn't interested in hearing any more about systemic racism, and the sight of Malcolm only seemed to deepen his irritation. "You're parked in a no-parking zone," Malone replied, his tone dismissive. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "I was given permission to park here for the event. This area was sectioned off." Malone didn't look convinced. "I don't see a permit on your dashboard," he retorted, stepping out of his car. His hand hovered dangerously near his belt, a gesture Malcolm noticed immediately. Taking a deep breath, Malcolm remained calm. "Officer, if you check with the event organizers, they'll confirm I was given permission." "Step away from the car," Malone snapped, interrupting him. The crowd, which had been dispersing moments before, took notice. Phones came out, capturing the exchange. Malcolm felt the weight of the eyes on him, but he stood firm. "I'm not resisting," he said, hands slightly raised in an attempt to de-escalate. "But I'm telling you." Before he could finish, Malone grabbed him by the arm and yanked him away from the car. The crowd gasped, their murmurs of outrage filling the air. "What are you doing?" Malcolm demanded, his voice measured but filled with disbelief. "You're under arrest," Malone said coldly, "for obstruction and failure to comply." The crowd erupted in protest, shouting Malcolm's name and questioning what he had done to deserve such treatment. Some people called out, accusing the officer of abusing his power, but Malone barely acknowledged them, a smug smirk playing at the corners of his lips. At the precinct, the situation only worsened. Malone booked Malcolm without offering him a phone call, and the other officers stood by, uneasy but silent. Then the razor appeared, as Malone mockingly held it up. "Time for a new look," he sneered. Malcolm's stomach twisted, but he refused to show fear. He knew the precinct's security cameras were recording, and he knew this would not be the end of it. As the razor buzzed over his scalp, shaving away his hair in uneven patches, Malcolm's thoughts raced. He thought about his family, his wife, Cassandra, and his children, and the countless individuals who had looked up to him as a beacon of justice. He silently vowed that this humiliation would not break him. The buzzing stopped as suddenly as it had started. Malone stepped back, admiring his handiwork with a cruel chuckle. But his moment of satisfaction was short-lived. A commotion erupted outside, and moments later, the door burst open. "What the hell is going on here?" barked Chief Harland, the precinct's commanding officer, his face a mask of fury as he took in the scene. Malcolm in handcuffs, his head freshly shaven, and Malone standing smugly with the razor still in hand. "Chief, Malone began, but the chief cut him off. "You're done, Malone," Harland snapped. "Cuff him." Malone's face turned a deep shade of red as two officers stepped forward to restrain him. "You can't do this. I'm the one who was wronged here." "No," Harland's voice was icy. "You were the one breaking the law, and now you're going to pay for it." As Malone was dragged away, his protests falling on deaf ears, Malcolm allowed himself a small, grim smile. Justice had been served, at least for now. But this was far from over. The precinct buzzed with tension as Officer Malone was led away in handcuffs, his furious protests echoing down the hallway. Judge Malcolm R.H.S. sat silently in the chair, his wrists still cuffed, his scalp raw from the shave. The room had descended into an eerie silence, the only sound being the murmurs of officers exchanging uneasy glances. Chief Harland, his expression a mix of regret and urgency, crouched in front of Malcolm. "Judge R.H.S., I'm deeply sorry for what happened here," he said quietly. "This is unacceptable. Malone will be dealt with, I promise you that." Malcolm met Harland's gaze, his tone unwavering but sharp. "Sorry isn't enough, Chief. This isn't just about me. It's about a system that allows people like him to wear a badge in the first place." Harland sighed, nodding. "You're right. I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. For now, let me get you out of those cuffs." Harland gestured to one of the officers, who hesitated briefly before unlocking the restraints. As the cold metal fell away, Malcolm rubbed his wrists, the physical reminder of the humiliation he had endured. But he didn't have time to process what had happened. He had work to do. "Chief," he said, standing tall, his presence commanding, "I need access to a phone." "Now." The chief nodded and handed over his cell. Malcolm immediately dialed his wife's number. When Cassandra picked up on the first ring, her voice was thick with concern. "Malcolm, what's going on? I've been getting calls and texts all morning about your arrest." "I'm okay," Malcolm assured her softly. "But things have escalated. I need you to call our lawyer and have him meet me at the precinct. We're pressing charges." Without hesitation, Cassandra replied, "I'm on it. I'll be there as soon as I can." As the call ended, Malcolm allowed himself a brief moment of relief. But his resolve hardened. Malone's actions weren't an isolated incident. They were a symptom of a much larger problem. This wasn't the time to stand down. Outside the precinct, a storm was brewing. Word of Malcolm's arrest and mistreatment had spread like wildfire, and a crowd of protesters had gathered. Signs reading "Justice for Malcolm" and "Stop Police Racism" waved above the sea of angry faces. Reporters scrambled to capture every angle of the unfolding drama. Inside, the officers avoided eye contact with Malcolm, who paced back and forth in a private room. His lawyer, Terrence Fields, arrived within the hour, his briefcase swinging by his side and his face set with determination. "Malcolm," Terrence said, gripping his friend's shoulder as he entered, "I saw the footage. It's all over the news. This is big." Malcolm nodded. "It's more than big, Terrence. This isn't just about me. This is about the people who face this every day and don't have the privilege of being a judge. This is our chance to make real change." Terrence opened his briefcase, pulling out a stack of papers. "We start with the immediate charges: assault, unlawful detainment, abuse of authority. But I think we need to go further. A civil rights lawsuit could shine a light on the systemic issues in this department." Before Malcolm could respond, Chief Harland entered the room, his expression grim. "I thought you should know," he began. "Malone's been placed in a holding cell pending an internal investigation. But there's a crowd outside, and it's not going away. They're demanding action." Malcolm straightened, his eyes hardening. "Good. Let them. This isn't just about one bad cop. It's about accountability across the board." Harland hesitated, his voice low. "Judge, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But if this turns into a media circus, it could jeopardize any chance of a fair trial for Malone." Malcolm's eyes narrowed. "A media circus, Chief? The only thing jeopardized here is the public's trust in law enforcement. And I'm not going to let that slide." Terrence spoke up. "The footage speaks for itself. This isn't going away quietly, no matter how much you might want it to." Harland sighed, clearly torn. "I'll do what I can to support you, Judge. But you should know that Malone isn't the only officer with these attitudes. There are others here who won't take kindly to what you're doing." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "Let them come. I've faced worse." As the day wore on, the crowd outside grew, their chants growing louder. Activists, community leaders, and everyday citizens filled the streets, their voices demanding change. Inside, Malcolm and Terrence finalized their legal strategy, combing through evidence and preparing for the fight ahead. But just as it seemed things had settled, a new crisis emerged. A young officer burst into the room, his face pale. "Chief, there's a group of counter-protesters gathering down the block. They're armed, and things are heating up." Harland cursed under his breath. "This is exactly what I was worried about. We need to get you out of here before things escalate." But Malcolm shook his head. I'm not running, Chief. This is bigger than me. I won't hide while people are out there fighting for justice. Terrence looked uneasy. Malcolm, think this through. If things get violent, you'll be a target. I understand the risks, Malcolm replied firmly. But if I back down now, what kind of example am I setting? The shouting outside grew louder, and Malcolm knew the moment of reckoning had come. Taking a deep breath, he stood tall and moved toward the door. Let's go, he said, his voice steady. It's time to face this head-on. As he walked toward the precinct's entrance, flanked by officers and his lawyer, the crowd outside came into view. Their faces were a mix of hope and anger, their voices a symphony of defiance. But just as he stepped outside, a loud bang echoed through the air, silencing the crowd. Chaos erupted, and Malcolm froze. His heart pounded, and the world seemed to spin around him.